Hey folks, back again with the Retro Rides podcast. This week we are talking road trips, and I've got with me Simon, whose voice you've heard before. He has done a couple of family-based road trips, come on me on a couple of trips, and I've got Andy with us this week because he has organised a number of road trips, and he is a bit of a connoisseur of the road trip. We'll also include sort of car-based holiday stuff as well, sort of stuff that doesn't require you to trek across a continent, and all of that good stuff. So hello, Simon.
Hello.
Hello, Andy.
Hello, my dudes. How are we doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. So I'm going to start, I think, probably with your favourite trip, just to get us into the sort of areas of where we've been going. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a long road trip or an adventure or something, just the sort of favourite car-based trip you've done. And I'm going to start with Simon.
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I've done quite a few car-based trips, but I'm going to take a simple answer. You sprung this on me and say, I enjoy sometimes just basic stuff. I quite like the drive down to Goodwood. It's not actually that far for me, and it takes in some sort of scenery and stuff. It's also where I go for the Southeast Club meet. But yeah, so it's a tiny one, but that is just a nice little journey, because I think to say, yeah, going to Bonneville, which I've been to, is great. It's not necessarily that attainable. And you can get enjoyment about just going to a show that's a bit further than local and involves a bit of scenery and places you don't usually go. So I'm going to go for just a drive down to Goodwood.
Nice. A little bit of country driving. Andy?
Goodwood's a great shout, man, but it's very, very local for me. It's like 45 minutes, so it'd be ridiculous for me to call that a road trip. I used to drive further for work every day, but thanks for repping the local pub meet. It's a tricky one. I, like Simon, lucky enough to have been on quite a few sort of car-based road trips. Favourite ones, I went to the Moon Eyes Streetcar Nats in Tokyo, which was pretty excellent. That wasn't strictly a car-based trip. We just were there on holiday and it sort of all worked out. But I've been back to Japan subsequently specifically for car-based stuff and went to like 3 shows in 3 weeks, which was really, really good.
That's cool. I think when you're on holiday with the family and you manage to slide in a little bit of car action, that counts. I think that's something that people, particularly probably the more mature of our listeners that have families and have to go on holiday with them, would definitely appreciate the fact you can get in a little bit of car activity.
I squeezed in my Bonneville trip on a family holiday. In fact, Nadine had booked it while I mentioned that while we might have been in America, we'd be going it would be when Speed Week was on, and she'd sort of just like 700 mile out of our way, but she just planned a holiday around it. And even by the time I got home from work that night, I'd even booked a van for us to pretty much sorted our holiday out, which is heroic. Cool.
Yeah. I'm lucky in that regard as well. Charlie would generally look at sort of, if we're planning to go like in September, say, to a place, she'll then look at that place and see if there's a particular weekend where something good is on car-wise in September, and that will become the sort of midpoint of the holiday, which is very nice.
Yeah, there's something good. Eat wherever you go on holiday, assuming it's not like in your own back garden. It just get the old Google out and go car museum or club meet or anything like that. I was in Croatia last year. I would be going back on Tuesday if it wasn't for this thing. And it turned out there was a car museum either a short paddle away, or if you went by road, half an hour away, and it was just full of super cool stuff. I think I have a little video of it somewhere, but yeah, just full of Yugos and Eastern European stuff, and it was fantastic. And it was just only by luck that I was there. Always worth on a family trip looking for a scrapyard or a classic car dealers or something.
Or the local club, like see if they got a local meet somewhere.
Yeah. Randomly Googling stuff along your route is a really great technique though, because I, like Simon, would be about to go on a holiday, which was actually a road trip, car-based road trip to a show in northern Italy called Southern Gardassi, and we'd planned sort of to go there and back for the show, but Elk actually was we decided to go the subsequent week, so sort of do the car show and then slowly meander back. But he was googling stuff along the route and found a whole another classic car meet at a motorsports event, which was called Grand Prix de l'Arche d'Or,
Nice.
which I'd never heard of,
No.
which was the week before. So we just sort of refactored the trip to do the car show at the end of the trip rather than the beginning, and meander our way there, and then go to this classic race meet for the whole weekend before the car show we were heading to, which I'm sure would be splendid if it was in fact happening.
Sadly,
It's not happening.
The corona came in and ruined everybody's plans for the year. The difficult thing I find with car stuff is the starting point. So there's so much you kind of have on your list of things you want to go to. You know, you could sit here for hours and hours and hours, probably all of us going, I would like to go to this event, that event, this event, like stuff in Australia, even stuff in the UK, Europe, America. You just go on forever. How do you pick, assuming you're not already planning a family trip, as per Simon and I, how do you pick where you want to go to next?
Well, I mean, for me, there's no concept of family trips, so like, I can sort of do whatever I want, which I suppose at this stage of my life does have its benefits. But really, like the road trips I've arranged, it has to be accessible. Like for me to say, oh, I'm going to organise a trip for the whole local sort of retro rides group, and we're going to go to Speed Week, or I'd love to go to Drag Week. That's like one of my big things. It's just not accessible for everyone, just the costs and the amount of time and everything. So I will do those things, but I'll do those things just with Dan or with Elk or whatever. Yeah. If I know I want to do a trip for like the whole group, and this one there was going to be 8 of us going, and the one we did 2 years ago where we went to racism in Poland, I think there was 9 of us went. It just needs to be accessible in terms of the amount of time that it takes to get there and back, the cost of the whole thing. You're only talking at probably £400 or £500 each for a 10-day holiday covering 3,000 miles and doing loads of cool stuff on the way there and the way back. Different car museums, stopping in different cities for like overnights, and most of it was hostel type accommodation, but we'd like book the whole room, so we'd have it just for us, so it's not like scruffy student type digs, although I mean if you're really trying to keep the cost down, that's an option too. But there's so many cool car shows in Europe, and to be honest, the ones we chose was just purely based on threads you see on forums and them looking really, really cool. Like you see all these pictures from Sogar, and we went to Wörthersee 7 years ago, which was actually for my 30th, although that was coincidental. But you look at pictures of Sogar now, and it just looks like Wörthersee did before it got the big corporate sponsorship. Not anything against that, of course, but it just looks like really neat. So it's like, okay, well, that's how we choose what show we want to go to. There's really not a great deal of science behind it. It's affordable. You can get there and back in probably 2-3 days each way without having to absolutely cannonball it, and it's affordable. So
yeah, that's cool.
That's it.
Simon, if you were planning your next trip, how would you go about deciding which of the numerous events?
I think, as Andy touched on there, I think one of the main things is you're looking at the internet and you're just going, that looks like a cool thing to do. I mean, anyone who's watched our SEMA video knows that SEMA's fun. So you'd watch something like that and go, yeah, I'd like to go to SEMA. And there's obviously just things that, as a car person, you should probably go to. We should all go to Pikes Peak, maybe, or just any old massive car events. But I think there was something about when we've already discussed it in a podcast, but we've been to the Hot Olds meet in Japan. And there's something great about going to a kind of a smaller show, something that people aren't expecting you to turn up at. It's all very well ticking off that I've been to the biggest shows in the world. It'd be good to go to the Summer Nats in Australia. But I would also like to just go to tiny stuff, some random Polish club meet or something would just be brilliant. I mean, even if you've got like 50 great cars in a car park is as good as 50 good cars amongst 1,000 other cars at another show, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So true.
Yeah. Hot Olds Meet was just all of our sort of stuff, just a car park full of it, and we probably saw more stuff that was what we're genuinely into there than we did at the whole of SEMA, which was an unbelievable experience. But in terms of just pure car stuff, pick a little event that the organisers find out you've come to, and they're quite excited to see a foreigner.
Yeah, that's good. I went to the All Odds Nationals in Tokyo, and again, that was just a family holiday that happened to coincide with All Odds Nationals being on, but it got shifted so that it was coinciding. The interesting thing with that is from the photos on the internet. So like Andy said, I picked that from seeing all the Moon Eyes coverage of it every year. It was a much smaller event than I thought it was going to be. I don't know if you found this with Streetcar Nationals, because Streetcar Nationals was in the same car park.
In a diver.
Yeah, in a diver. And the Hot Olds Meet is actually a bigger show than the All Odds Nationals. Not that you'd get that impression from the internet. It didn't make it any worse or anything. It was brilliant. As you say, like, it was the fact that I went there and every single car there I came away with a photograph of, because every single car in that place was brilliant.
Amazing.
So I think that's probably a good point as well, is sometimes you'll go to an event that's like one of the big marquee events, and maybe not everything there is for you, and you wouldn't expect that from a huge marquee event. But sometimes you'll get more value out of going to a slightly smaller event, and it'll also be probably a bit cheaper because it'll be off season. I think if people that travel to the UK for like Festival of Speed or something, if you're trying to book a hotel in the southeast of England at that point in the year, it's expensive and impossible. So you have to think about that kind of wherever you're going as well. So the only event that I have camped at in the last 10 years,
I'm just laughing at you and camping.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous concept. Is Le Mans Classic, because you can't get a hotel for love nor money within like a 2-hour journey of Le Mans Classic. It's ridiculous, and that's fine. But that's a thing to consider. Like if you're not a campist, then that is a thing you do have to consider. Like when you're looking at these big scale events, whereas the smaller events you may even get a little bit more out of, but they're a little bit harder to find. That's what I find. I think that we stumbled across Hot Olds Association, but I think we had a better chance of finding like the Moon Eyes events and stuff, because they were much more well publicized. So finding smaller events is a little bit trickier, I think.
That's a fair point. That Le Mans Classic is definitely right up there on my list.
It's amazing.
Possibly even next year, I think, is a realistic possibility.
The fact I camped there will tell you how good it is.
Well, I don't mind a bit of camping. So
yeah,
like I was saying about accessible, it's super accessible. It's so easy to get there.
Yeah. For that one, actually, this is another good thing to think about, and I'll come to you on this for European jaunts. Is when the first time I went there, I did Dover to Calais on the train, and then drove across France to Le Mans in a convoy, which was something else we probably need to discuss, because that's quite tricky to keep tabs on.
Done a bit of that.
And then this next time I went, I did, I think it's Portsmouth to Caen, or Cannes, however you say it, which is much longer on the boat, but it's 2 hours on the other side down an empty auto route. And it was just a dream. It was so much better, even though it was a shorter trip. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does take a fair bit of planning. Like a lot of the trips that I've planned, there's multiple long evenings on the internet planning it all out, and there's a bit of experience as well, because, for example, the trip we did to racism, we quite quickly learned that the length of some of the days driving that we'd put in were just too long and too tiring, and we'd pick some awesome places to stay, but by the time you got there, all you could think about was finding somewhere to eat as quickly as possible and then going to bed. So it's kind of wasted to a certain extent, even worrying about where you're stopping if you're just sort of trying to cover distance. So it's a question of really balancing, like how far away the show is, what chunks you want to break it up into, and then think, well, maybe the first couple of days you do just want to cover miles to get closer, and then have a few slow days where you just do like, maximum of like 150, 200 miles, and then have a afternoon, evening somewhere, not have to get up really early and get straight back in the car.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said as well, is if you're on a bit of a road trip, it's one thing sort of, 500 miles in a day and just getting on the Autobahn or whatever and just hitting the road. But there's another amazing opportunity to just take a really leisurely, cool drive and then stop at all sorts of things. If you want to stop off because you see something cool and unusual just parked in a driveway, or if you just see a great place to take a photo of all your cars together or something, you don't want to be driving through them just thinking, I really need to go to bed. Or something like
exactly.
that. So, I mean, we had on our way to SEMA this year, there's some video evidence of it. We did 5 miles in about an hour and a half, I think, doing that.
Yeah, because we kept stopping to look at cool stuff.
Yeah, and we probably could have done that all day, I think. But that was something to be said about that version of covering distance.
Yeah, definitely. I found I went to Troyes, anyway, down in the middle of France, just on a holiday. It wasn't like a proper road trip or anything. And on the way down there, I auto-routed the entire way down just to get there, so past Reims and stuff like that. And on the way back from where we were up to Reims, we did the back roads because it's a really pretty area with loads of pretty little medieval towns. And it took like twice as long, but we knew once we got on the other side of Reims, we'd be straight on the auto route and we'd be able to get our train at Calais. So we took, rather than just bounce our way up the country as quickly as possible, we left a little bit earlier to enjoy the scenery. And I think if you've got a nice scenic drive in a nice car with some nice people, that's every bit as much fun as going to a particular place by a particular time, maybe.
In a road trip, I mean, the journey is part of it. It's not just about the destination. And your destination might be 2-3 days away sometimes. So actually the journey is a big part of it. And you've got stop-offs and you're going to stop at cool places. But actually, you might be changing drivers. So you've all got the opportunity to enjoy some roads. But it's just embracing the fact it's a road trip, I think.
Yeah, and having the right car as well. I think
the right car,
Yeah. Not that I've done that many road trips in cool cars. I feel a bit awful in that. When you do your thing next year, I'm going to come with you, Andy, and I'm going to well, I don't know. I'd love to. I really wanted to come on this one, but I had already booked the holiday I'm now not going on.
You're always invited, Simon, but it is tricky, I understand.
It'd be hard to uninvite
so much
me
holiday
now.
time.
Yeah, definitely. The itinerary that you laid out looked fantastic. Like you've undersold it talking to us here. I reckon you could sell tickets for that one. That would be awesome.
I probably could. Maybe this is how I make my millions, designing road trips.
There's that's actually brought me on to something that is on my list of things to cover. So I've never done one of the like GT Classics or any of that kind of organised road trip. I don't have the car for it really, and I don't have the money to spend on a trip like that because they are generally quite expensive. But on the flip side, they're extraordinarily well organised by people that have done it literally hundreds of times to these destinations, and they know exactly what they're doing. So there is a temptation, I think, sometimes to sort of look at them and think, I should probably just go on one of those because that's going to whatever happens, that's going to be a good trip because they're experts at it. The problem I have is that I can't part with, the best part of $2,500 to go on a trip to Orléans or something because I could go and organise that myself. So that's kind of it's a bit of a.
It depends what you're looking for, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. I think that there's probably more than a lot of people out there that would like just someone to present them with an itinerary
and then go and do it.
Yeah. I think that's a nice trip.
I've actually done through. I was working on it, but I did the Cannonball Run Europe, which was an interesting experience, and I didn't necessarily enjoy it because I was working. But that's one of those trips where you know the hotel you're going to, and it's a posh hotel, and they've got secure parking because everyone's driving Lamborghinis and stuff, and then you've got a meal laid on, and then a party afterwards. That was my job.
Right.
But if that's what you want, I don't know. It was a lot of sort of hobnobbing rich guys having enormous fun. It seemed fun from my position on the outside, but it's, sleeping in cars in cool places is also pretty funky.
I think that also it doesn't have to be at that level. So obviously I chose GT Classics because they sort of advertise to me constantly for some reason, and they pop up in my feed quite a lot. And the Cannonball is like another one of those ridiculous volumes of cash to go and do it. But Classic Ford run their own tours and stuff. I think
they do an island one. I think that does look good and is quite well priced as well.
Yeah, very accessible.
I think that there's definitely more accessible versions of it. So I mean, even if you just want to dip your toe into the "do I enjoy road tripping" world, I think maybe that's a good start. Because you're going to be around people that know what the pitfalls are, or hook up with someone like Andy that's done it a few times that knows actually having a 15-car convoy trying to travel 200, 300 miles is actually a pain in the ass. So we'll arrange it slightly differently.
I mean, actually, for a dip into the waters of this sort of stuff, I know my local Volkswagen club that I end up mentioning all the time, Paint Scrapers guys, they go to a club meet in Calais. They'd they literally just nip over and almost park up where they get off the ferry, and there's a Volkswagen club over there that has their own show every year just on the front, and they go there. That's a European road trip that takes a day.
That's another great point, Simon. They don't have to be 3,000-mile round trips.
No.
You could just go, do you know what? We're going to go to another club's club meet that we can't just go to and be back for lunch. It might be an overnight stop.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine. Even if it's in the UK, like you could go to Scotland or something.
Yeah.
Or not even that far, go down to Cornwall. Right? Old school run to the sun style. Stay overnight and come back.
Yeah, no, that's a good point actually. I mean that's a really nice way of getting out in your car somewhere that you haven't been before, probably a nice bit of the world. Like head up to, I don't know, a meet up north. There's the Northern Retro Rides guys, and there's all these other groups and clubs that have regular meets. Just aim for one of them and hit it. Or if you're up north, come down to Goodwood or whatever for like one of their breakfast clubs or something. So come down on the Saturday, have their breakfast clubs on the Sunday, go to the breakfast club, and then head back straight after. Like that kind of thing is really good. Andy actually visited me. So Andy's in the deepest, darkest southeast, and I'm in the deepest, darkest southwest. Well, sort of. And you came and overnighted at my place, and then went to the Haynes Breakfast Club.
Really good.
Really nice.
Perfect example of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We actually went to the Fry Up Club North Mids meet once as well, which was will be a few years ago now. But if you remember when Don't Tell Him Pike off the forum passed away, sadly, they did a sort of memorial event of their regular pub meet that he used to attend. So a whole bunch of us from the southeast went up to that, and it was a whole day out rather than just popping to your local breakfast meet. But it was well worth it.
Even doing an evening club meet, you can finish work or whatever, and hit the road at sort of 5, 6, and even a couple of hours drive. You can still be at a club meet in a warm summer evening in a nice car, maybe with some mates, you just save money on maybe some drinks because you were there for a bit less time than other people.
We did that.
Come to ours, right by Goodwood, by a river, nice big car park.
It is. I'm looking forward to getting back there actually. But that's nearly 2 hours for me, I think, or about 1.5 hours for me to get there. But it's never a problem. It's like I say, it's a nice drive down there. So
I think you're probably the furthest regular attendee.
I think it's a nice distance, that really, because it's enough time to get into the drive, but it's not not to the point where you get to like 3 hours and you're just like, I just want to stop now and get out. It's kind of, my distance to Shelsley from here is 2 hours 40 depending on traffic, and it's just a nice amount of distance, so I can drive up there for one of their events and get there for kind of 10 o'clock ish, and then bimble back after lunch. It's quite nice. But yeah, so short road trips, like in a day or overnighting somewhere is a good dip of the toe. I think from anywhere in the UK, heading over to Belgium for something, they've got a good strong car scene, and there's always something on there, and it's super easy with the tunnel or a ferry or whatever. It's not too expensive either usually. So
well, there's some good stuff in Ireland, I think.
Yeah,
I've been to a couple in Ireland as well with our good friend Irish Mark. We've Elk and I have flown over there a couple of times, stayed with him, gone to a car show, gone to a drifting thing, and then come back on the Monday.
Well, that's another thing, is the flying and doing something. So we're talking
road trip without a car.
Yeah, reasonable amount of road tripping, like jumping in your car and going somewhere with some friends. But when we went to Japan, we didn't have a car. It was all of us have sort of had to get to wherever we're going to see cars by plane. And
I can tell you some funny stories about that. Going to car-based things in Japan without a car can get quite sketchy.
Yeah. We had the same thing, didn't we? We didn't hire a car at all when we were in Japan, but we still managed to roll back with some of the guys at the show. So it can work. That's another thing, actually. Even if you don't necessarily know anyone, there's someone friendly on a forum somewhere in a group that you can just go, oh, yeah, how about, obviously
people are good people.
Yeah, be a bit careful. But there's a guy somewhere at some show that will just go, yes, come along. You could probably stay at my house and ride in my car. And we met people in Japan who we only ever knew as a name on a forum, and gave us a tour of like Tokyo in the evening that we could never have learned without living there for a couple of years.
It's unbelievable.
So yeah,
did you nearly get kidnapped by Yakuza?
Wow.
What happened?
The particular incident I was thinking of was when we attempted to go to Daikoku Futo without a car, which, as you know, is basically a motorway service station on an island over a motorway bridge, which you can't walk over. So we attempted to take a taxi there, but even with Elk's pretty decent understanding of Japanese, we couldn't make the driver understand where we wanted to be taken to, even though we had like Google Maps on our phone and we were pointing to the exact point. And it turned into him pulling over on the hard shoulder where you could see the service station like over the barriers, and making us get out of the car and then driving off. And then we attempted to walk into the service station, but there was these big signs saying no pedestrians, and there was like barriers. So we ended up basically climbing over a wall and I wouldn't say breaking in, but sort of climbing in to the service station. But what we didn't realise, the corner we chose to go in through was a police station. So we had to sort of, wouldn't say hide, but stay very still for a while until some police cars had gone past, and then sort of scurry in. And we had a fantastic evening. Like, everyone's seen the internet what Daikoku Futo is like. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. But then, of course, we've got the thought of how on earth are we going to get back? So we basically just walked around, looking at cars, earwigging on conversations, heard people speaking in English, and then went and introduced ourselves and explained our predicament. And the very first group that we tried that with were like, well, we'll give you a lift back.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting a lift in some rad, like, was it a late Mark II or a JZX or something? Like drift car.
Nice.
Absolutely wild ride back into town. It's actually a US serviceman that was on permanent deployment to Japan.
Wow. That's awesome.
The second time I went, I rented a car. So my advice is to do that, because the first time we went was really dumb, and definitely don't do that. But it was funny. But renting a car in Japan is an experience as well.
Well, that's I'm going to come on to that actually. We'll circle back to renting and driving in foreign countries. The one thing that brought up to my mind was, way back when we were at the Nakayoshi Old Association, we were listening out for people that could kind of speak English. Was really kind of one of the things to be doing. And because when you're in Japan, if someone speaks English, they are like gold dust, because they can finally help you communicate with other people and all that kind of thing. So we were very lucky in that I managed to get in touch with the guy that we knew off the internet that could definitely speak English. But all the time I was there, I was waiting, because you're very obviously not Japanese. So people that can speak English will come and talk to you because they think you're lost, because we looked very excited and lost in equal measure, I think.
They just want to practice on you.
A little bit of practice on us. But last time I was in Japan for the All Oz Nationals, this American guy came over and just started talking to me. Obviously one of the only other Westerners that I could see over there. And he was just chatting to me about photographs and stuff. And he's got a really good Instagram called International Car Shows. And they're all just pictures from Japanese car shows. But I only met him because he was one of the other Westerners kind of out there. And I think that's a thing to look out for if you are at a very foreign event, is to look for someone that communicates in your language, because you'll probably get a firm friend, at least for a few minutes.
It's almost a top tip, really, especially if you're starting to feel a bit nervous.
Yeah.
If you're lost, or like we were, we had no way of getting back.
Yeah.
English does stand out in a crowd. If everyone else is not speaking English, you can sort of beeline in on it.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, I think that's it's definitely, as you said, the top tip is to, if you are doing your lost in translation experience, but you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or you're just looking for some more information, then it's quite easy to pick out an English speaker, which is quite nice. So to circle back to the hiring of cars, every time I've been to the States, this is my top tip actually, every time I've been to the States, or at least when I've been to Vegas or LA, is when I've hired a car, I've always hired like a Ford Fiesta or whatever the equivalent is on their little checkbox. And then when I go to pick it up, I'm like, have you got anything more interesting? I'm paying the full insurance, because that's all they really care about, is you paying the full insurance. And every single time I've come out with Camaro, Dodge Challenger, Mustang, something like that. And they're great fun for road trips. So I think there's definite mileage, but it doesn't have to be an interesting car. But I think it's always fun if you can pick up yourself an interesting car when you're in a country.
Let me get this straight. So are you still paying Fiesta money?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Go sort of late in the day as well, where they start to run out of stuff. All the boring businessmen that have got a budget have taken all the mid-size. As long as you've booked and paid for a cheapy car, if they don't have one when you get there, that's their problem.
Yeah, and if you're paying the full insurance, seems to be the deal breaker. I was going to say, if you're paying like the lowest level of insurance, you'll get whatever compact they find for you. But if you've got the full insurance, the reason being is because the hire companies that have interesting cars, particularly if you're going between Vegas and LA, or LA and San Francisco, etc., someone will have hired something interesting to do that trip, and they want it taken back. So you get to take it back, which is quite nice.
Those are both really good trips. The Route 1 from the Pacific Coast Highway from LA up to San Francisco is a really great trip.
I'm supposed to be doing it in September, but we shall see.
Recommend.
I've done it the other way. I've come down, which actually was. This is another thing. It's amazing how many coincidences happen when you look into these things. When we were coming back from Bonneville, we did the PCH coming down from San Fran, and it just happened to be Monterey week.
Oh,
so yeah, Pebble Beach stuff going on, which was kind of just Miura coming along with us on the road. Yeah, so
Monterey is lovely anyway, but what time?
Yeah, that's the funny thing, is it's amazing how often these unplanned things happen.
Yeah.
you can't quite rely on them, but you can almost go, hang on a minute, I seem to be here at this time. And these stories have always got this element of luck where you meet someone or find something that it's just there. Scenes happen.
Yeah, I went to Historic J after the first time I went to SEMA in 2014. So we went into Vegas, so Charlie and I, and I did a day and a half of SEMA because the first time I'd been, didn't know really what it was about. And I had like a very particular plan of who I wanted to speak to, and I was happy once I'd spoken to them. And then I went back for another half day whilst Charlie stayed at the hotel. And the next day, we were driving to LA, so we were staying in Santa Monica. And before I left, I had a quick look, is there anything on? And there was this show called Historic J, which was like retro Japanese stuff in the car park at Santa Monica Pier. You could literally see it from our apartment. So I was like, okay. Yeah. But yeah, I didn't know that was happening. We didn't plan around that being there. So I got a day out of that, and then I got the photos published. So that was great. Basically got a feature out of it.
Is that a precursor to JCCS?
No, it was a it was
really close.
It was ended up being a one-off. I think they wanted to do more of them, but I think they had problems doing them again, or it was a first-time event, and then given that JCCA is on in the same area,
it's Long Beach.
As I understand it, like people were expecting a JCCA size event, but I'm like, well, I wasn't expecting anything.
JCCS isn't that big, in truth. That was actually one of the first holidays that was specifically to go to a car show that I ever did. And that was, I think we just did a long weekend. It was Dan and myself. We flew in, did JCCS, and then we drove to Vegas, and I think we had 2 nights in Vegas, and then flew back.
Yeah,
and that was the first time I went to JCCS. It's not big, but it's like Simon was saying just now. Everything there is our kind of thing, and it's all really, really cool.
Yeah.
So even though it's not huge, you can easily spend a full day just
that's all you need as well. And also the other thing is, if you've flown in to do the show, actually it being overwhelmingly large might be a bit of a disservice because you're eventually going to end up overwhelmingly tired. So
it's just one day as well.
Just
1 day show.
It's great.
There's another thing to be said about, actually, we're talking about car things tacked onto a holiday, but actually you can have quite a good holiday tacked onto a car thing.
Yeah.
Because I can't think of a better way of seeing Japan, and not all of Japan, you didn't get right, but if you're not really into the touristy stuff, if you're going to come to London without going to Buckingham Palace, if you're that kind of guy that you want to avoid the actual touristy stuff, you can see the place, you can get the vibe, and you can meet people who are real. So that's exactly it. If you want to, like we went on our trip in Japan, we went on a bullet train because that's how we needed to get there. And you just get to use bits of a culture, but with an objective other than just, I'm going to look at these things here. You're like, I'm going to a car show, and on my way, I've seen this cool thing and this cool thing, and I've been to this place. I'd probably never been to Vegas if it wasn't for SEMA.
Yeah, but that's right. You get to look at places you wouldn't ordinarily go to. It's a great thing. From holidays with a car thing tacked on point of view, I went down to Provence and stayed at a place called, I'm going to mispronounce it horribly, sorry French people, it's like Hamé de Beau or something. It's a very nice.
I reckon you smashed the pronunciation.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. I think there's French people thinking you've got someone in to say that for you.
And it's just like, it was a short drive from the airport, and we got like a tiny little city car, like an Up or something like that. And we drove it there, and whilst we were there, we hired classic cars because the hotel had a collection of classic cars that you could hire. So we just drove around Provence in an open top Alfa Romeo for like a little Spider, 1960 something Spider. It was just delightful.
Did you choose that hotel because of that? It's not another thing you lucked on, is it?
No,
okay.
Charlie chose it as a combination of quality of hotel and car stuff. So yeah, you can find stuff that's kind of dovetails nicely with what you're planning to do anyway. I think that's quite nice. But as you say, you can do it the other point of view of just going, well, I just want to go to this one day event, but this is in a nice place, so I'm going to go there for a week, and that event is just part of that trip. And then as Andy points out, you can find other stuff to fill that time, whether that's as tourist or if you find another car museum or something.
Yeah. I have another point I wanted to make.
Yeah, for sure.
Staying in touch with people you meet at car shows, and then going to car shows in their country later.
Yeah.
That's
so
nice.
when I went to Ebisu, pronounce that wrong, for the Spring Matsuri, the big drift festival, like a week-long drift festival, which was amazing. We met some Aussie dudes, and we ended up hanging out with them for most of the time. Really, really cool. Stayed in touch with them afterwards. And then I think it was must be 3 years later, maybe longer. One of them ended up back in Japan, but rather than up in the north in Fukushima, where Ebisu is, he was in Osaka, and I was in Japan working, and it was the weekend that Osaka Auto Messe was on. So having met him once and not seen him for 3 years, I arranged to meet him again, and he put me up and everything, stayed in I think it was his friend's place actually, and we went to that Osaka show. And it was absolutely brilliant. And now he's on at me all the time about going to Oz and going to Summer Nats or whatever. And he's planning to come here next year to go to, he wants to go to the Festival of Speed, because obviously that's what he knows as a big event.
It's worth coming to.
Yeah, I'll try and twist his arm to come to Retro Rides, obviously. But so that's another super cool thing. And the guy I mentioned before that sort of rescued us when we got stuck at Daikoku Futo the first time. We're still in touch with him, still chat to him occasionally. He's back in the US now, but
well, we got that with Takayuki-san that drove us from Nakayoshi Old to Tokyo and then took us out to his yard in the evening. I stayed in touch with him, and then he came over to the UK for a meeting. He was here for a week or something, and he was like, I'm around on, I think it was a Saturday morning or something. So we arranged, there was nothing on, there was literally no car event on that weekend, so we arranged a Retro Rides meet in Richmond Park, kind of semi-last minute, and I went and picked him up from the centre of town and drove him down to Richmond Park, and then we went and had donuts at Krispy Kreme, and it was pretty sweet.
That was good. I'm thinking about other international friendships and stuff. I'm thinking of the guy at the gathering last year who got his dad to bring him to the gathering. It was great. He'd flown over and he'd done exactly what we'd recommend to do, which was go to what is apparently a sort of a small meet that you've seen videos or pictures of. And him and his dad. Were you not there, David, at the time?
I might have been.
Yeah,
I can't remember much of most of those weekends, to be fair.
I want to say he was from Holland. He was some tall guy with blonde. He looked
yes.
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
That's it. And he was with his dad, but he was literally yelping joy at standing in the middle of the gathering. And that's what you want, even if you take someone who doesn't really want to go, that's quite good fun as well. You've got to remember is what you want from a show sometimes is to soak in a bit of the atmosphere of the place. And things I'd actually love to see the gathering from the outside sometimes, because it's a really English setting. So if you can get yourself somewhere that's in the heart of the country you're in, that sort of epitomizes it for you, and a car show, then that's fantastic. You imagine coming to the gathering if you're not from England, or you're from somewhere quite different to England, and you're slap bang in the historical heart of motor racing, just from visiting a small show.
Yeah, in the beautiful English countryside. You
Yeah.
couldn't pick a better setting, really.
No, it does work quite well. Actually, that does tie in a little bit with something else I've got on my list of things. Is who you go with, and this isn't not a difficult thing. It's an interesting thing to make sure you try and get right is people that are in the same kind of attitude about whatever it is you're doing to you. We've all been to car shows with people that don't necessarily want to be at that car show. Whether that's even like, I'm not saying that some ridiculous stereotype of my wife doesn't enjoy car shows, because my wife does, but more along the lines of you I don't know, if you go to a drift event with someone that doesn't like drifting, that's not going to be fun for either of you. So I think if you're going with a group of people, like curating that group of people for people that are going to be enjoying what you're doing, or giving the other people that maybe are trying to get something else out of it the space. So I really want to go down to Mulhouse and go to the Bugatti Museum there. Now, if I was doing a road trip with some people, I should imagine the majority of the people I know would probably not want to spend as much time as I would wandering around that museum. And that's fine. But it would knock me then that I'd get rushed around that museum and have to leave. But equally, if I was like dragging my feet going around the museum and everyone just wanted to go, they'd be getting pretty annoyed with me. So I think that's a thing to be tricky. Yeah.
Should I tell you how I do it? And it's definitely not right or wrong. It's just how I do it.
Sure.
And it seems to work so far. I basically sit down either by myself or with one other person, which historically will either be Elk or Dan, and work out the whole itinerary. And we decide, or I decide, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. And then I publicize it and say, this is what is happening. Anyone that wants to join, you're absolutely welcome. And I'll arrange everything in terms of overnights and tickets and whatever else. Because what I've learned from doing a few of these things is if you get the group together first and then you try and work out precisely what you're going to do on each day, where you're going to stop off, whatever, there is no way that you'll be able to make it work for everyone. So you're always going to get somebody that at some stage is going to be annoyed that what they wanted to do isn't happening. Like you might have to skip an entire stop that they really wanted to do just because you can't make it work. Or there's something they wanted to do that everyone else didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Or like you say, you want to spend a chunk of time somewhere and one person doesn't and two people do. So I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but the way that I have learned to do it is I just say, this is what is happening. I know it's spectacular. Plan loads and loads of really cool stuff. We're not doing everything there is to see on this particular route. Of course not. That's impossible. And by all means, if it's not for you, it's not for you. If you want to come. And that's just kind of how it's been. And then, if it doesn't work out to be awesome, then I'll have to take that on the chin. But it always does. So I don't.
I think there's something about, if you're the guy that's organised the trip or something, it's just making sure that the people you're taking are pretty cool guys, or at least they understand that if it's going to be a trip where you're going to stop places, then say it. And say also, I know your trips are really well planned and stuff, but sometimes not planning stuff works quite well, and you can arrive somewhere and it's closed, and you want a group of people that are just going to go, yeah, but we're here though, and like not get upset. Obviously, you don't want a trip where everything's closed and someone's screwed up. But you
can't over plan, and I'm not a super organised person that's got everything meticulous to detail.
But a trip
goes wrong.
That's got some flexibility and that has got a bit, just having mates on board that aren't going to go, but you said it was going to be this, and now we're here. But where you just want to go with the flow and go to the next place, and everyone's happy and everyone's pleased. Actually, as a group of guys, we're all quite individual with different needs, and we do all right. And it's worth saying, actually, that we are only friends through retro rides. None of us knew each other before, so every single one of these trips that we're talking about, apart from ones with family, is with people that we've met online, that we've met at car shows.
Funny world, isn't it?
Yeah, strange.
It's a good world.
The other thing with family trips, actually, is also not to, if your kids or your spouse of whatever type doesn't enjoy the car show aspect of a trip, if you're trying to, don't take, no. Yeah.
Don't get a different spouse.
Take them to a place where there is something else to do. If I'm going to Le Mans Classic, is a great example. there is other stuff to do around there, but like when Le Mans Classic is on, that's all it is. Like that's everything and everywhere. But when we went to Santa Monica, like Charlie came to Historic J with me, but she could quite easily have gone and done something else. We're in LA. There's so much other stuff on. And if you're with a family and you don't want to be dragging your 4-year-old kid around a car show all day, but your spouse is there with you, then off they can go and do something else for the day. And obviously you'll likely have to return the favour if someone you're with wants to go and do something for themselves. But that, I think, would be a nice balanced way of doing that, because it must be hard with families, as Simon is probably about to indicate.
I can tell you from experience, actually, that you can put your family through too much. We spent 4 weeks in the States, and I do not stop going. In fact, I've annoyed you guys with it before, of just noticing everything, even like, oh, look, there's a US spec version of something we see every day at home.
That's a Ford Focus.
Yeah. God, yeah. I annoy even car people with my with my inane car nonsense. But imagine 4 weeks of it if you're not interested in cars at all. And I seem to remember at one point, I think my wife went, "Just stop." She doesn't want to stop and look at Impalas in Compton, apparently. It's unnecessary to stop everywhere and take, I want a photo of that one. I've got a thread on Retro Rides that I'm trying to show people these things. But yeah, so be careful with your family. Although I did have a rule when I was younger, not on a road trip, but just on car shows. The children say, "Can I come with Daddy?" And I'd say, "You're not going on any bouncy castles." And they'd go, "I'll stay at home then." Because car shows aren't about bouncy castles, they're about cars.
Car shows always have a fun fair. Wheels Day always has a bouncy castle.
Yeah.
So the wife and kids have got something to do.
Yeah.
It's funny, I was thinking back on this a little while ago. I used to go to Brands Hatch almost every weekend.
Similar. I used to go to Brands Hatch a lot as a kid.
And the
donuts.
Yeah, the donuts were great. But I realised I must have been, from about the age of 8 onwards, there were many events that I would go to and I would just roll down their bank at the back of
the South Bank.
Yeah, South Bank. As a kid, just rolling down that whilst the motor racing was happening. I can't imagine the amount of interesting cars I missed. But I was a kid, so there's just me and a mate. My dad used to go and watch cars, and I used to just wander around being an idiot. So yeah, it's you can't force kids to like cars. That's what I discovered out of that. And the reason I think of that in this is because if you're planning trips and stuff, I guess, and you have a family, the natural inclination is to tend to drag them along. But maybe it's better psychologically for everybody not to do that. I don't know. I don't have children. That's a Simon question.
I've already told you. You're not going on the bouncy castles. That's my rules.
I thought of something else. A bit of a segue.
Go for it.
Dawn drives.
Oh.
It's sort of like a road trip, but not.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of really, really good ones.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lovely way to meet up with your friends from your local area that you have regular meets with, but also people from neighbouring areas that you kind of know. The one we did through London, where we went all around the sort of Olympic Village, and was it Seth that arranged that?
Seth arranged that, yeah.
He
arranged
good.
2. Yeah, they were great fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice trip.
That was a great thing to do. And we did one in Birmingham, which is quite a way for us. So that's a good example of like meeting up with people from more distant car groups or whatever. Because for us to get up to Birmingham for a dawn drive, we left in the middle of the night. But Brian Damaged coordinated that. And that was great. That was a really nice drive. We picked a really nice route. And then we went somewhere for breakfast. And then we went to a stock car meet, which was quite fun. And then we drove back.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah, no, that's a good road trip. One of the interesting things about all of our road trips so far is none of them have that element of danger. So when I did the Amy Shaw podcast, she was saying one of the difference between just driving a car somewhere and a road trip is the element of danger that your car may or may not make it. And that is not a thing that necessarily appeals to me. But we know people that have done those sort of banger sort of cross-continent jaunts. I can't even remember which one it was, but it ended up in Uzbekistan or somewhere like that, didn't it? As I remember.
My brain's gone.
Elk did one in a Hillman Mix, didn't he, or something like that? Yeah.
It's a Singer. Is it a Singer Gazelle or something? It's the Mongol Rally.
That's it. So
that's serious. That is a long way.
Yeah, I worked with someone that did that before I even knew Elkin that did that in Fiat Panda, and they left their Fiat Panda in Mongolia and flew home because they just couldn't get it working again. And the locals would
those are the people that they don't want on those rallies. That's why there's a big tax for taking old cars into these countries now, because they're fed up with these rallies abandoning cars.
Yeah, quite. So I think that that's a whole different level of road trip. But that, again, it's organised though. So you have support and...
those are organised.
So they're an element of danger with a little bit of safety net, which I think is probably the ideal way to do those. I think if you wanted to do that solo, that's a whole nother level of adventure that you probably shouldn't.
I think I'd be more attracted to doing it solo.
Really?
Because I don't like organised fun or people particularly. Yeah. If I know the people I'm going with and I know I like them, there might be a bit of friction here and there, but by and large, we're going to have a good time. But strangers, there's always a huge risk that you're just going to hate the people you're stuck with for the next however many weeks.
That's a really good point, actually. And I think a thing to touch on briefly for the psychology of anyone going on more of a road trip than like one of our day-long sort of trips, like something that takes a bit of time. If you're on a trip with anyone for any length of time, pretty much, you're going to end up with a bit of friction. Particularly if you've gone overseas. Like our SEMA trip, we were all tired and jet-lagged. We were all a little bit narky. So the majority of the time, everything was fine, but occasionally you just get annoyed that dinner was taking so long or something, or someone was in the kitchen when you wanted to go and get a donut or something, right? Because donuts were fueling us. And the same is going to be true on cross-country jaunts. Like even if you're like the best mates in the world, we've all been on holiday with our friends. At some point, someone gets annoyed with someone. Yep. But it's just a thing that happens, and it's all right. It doesn't matter. Don't let it spoil your trip.
Oh, absolutely not. And like, it's life at the end of the day. But I think arrange it so that you don't have to be in the same car for the whole trip. You don't have to be with the same two people for the same trip. Like, just from a pure like safety and common sense perspective, you want to have the capacity for all the cars to be driven by multiple people, so that if something happens or someone's just tired, not feeling well, you can swap in and out. But then it means if there's a little bit of friction between a couple of people, they can just go, do you know what? We've got a 4-hour drive now. We're just going to sit in cars and just get over it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's just
I think when you're like all living on top of each other for a little while, particularly with people you don't usually live with, finding somewhere to have a little bit of space would be my tip for trips of all kinds. So one evening we came back from SEMA and I just put on my headphones and I think sat on the sofa facing the window and just listened to music staring at the floor, which sounds extreme, but like it was so overwhelming because you're at SEMA all day and there's like noise and people and people and people and people and people, and you get back to this place and there's people and there's people. And even for someone that's quite gregarious, which I am not, but even quite gregarious people, I think it must be quite draining. And I just needed like a sort of half-hour of timeout, and then I was kind of back to just being grumpy rather than wanting to go home.
I don't know what you're talking about. I had a great time at SEMA, and I'm disappointed that there's any time where you were sad about being around me, David. I had nothing but a fantastic time all the time. No one criticised my driving at all, which I found very comfortable. And I felt
red light.
Oh. Yeah.
That was merely pointing out that you're about to drive through a red light.
So I did drive through a red light, not just about to. Continue to do so.
That's a really interesting thing, actually. Was not just on that point precisely, but being comfortable driving overseas. That's a thing you have to learn if you're going to do some of these trips. And I remember the first time I drove in Ibiza. It was the first time I'd driven left-hand drive anywhere, and it's quite nice because it's quite a quiet thing. But I ended up driving on the wrong side of the road twice, pulling out T-junctions.
Is that all?
That was it's all right because it's in the middle of nowhere in the country. But I should imagine if I'd have done that in the middle of the state somewhere, it would have been probably somewhat more traumatic. I think that it's worth taking it gently, learning how to drive on the wrong side of the road. For those of you either coming to the UK that drive on the left or those that drive on the correct side of the road and they go into the continent.
We have to embrace that most road trips we do are going to involve something of that nature.
Yeah.
Because we're obviously the outliers in the right-hand drive, left side of the road thing. It's almost worse driving from here, though, because then you're in a UK car on the wrong side of the road, so you sort of can't see what's going on half the time. A left-hand drive car abroad sort of makes more sense than taking your car abroad. But then if you're going on a road trip, you're going to be in your car abroad, so you just sort of have to go steady and don't drive like a dick.
I sometimes find it harder when I get back to adjust because you're thinking about it so much, and then you'll think, what am I supposed to be doing now? Yeah.
I get it. When I come back from, if you've been overseas on a plane and I fly in, you're usually a bit tired anyway. And I pull out of the car park at like Heathrow, and I'm just like, they have that weird thing where there is no rules for a little while because just all these roads are merging and there's hundreds of roundabouts, and you're just like, and I'm sort of pulling onto these roads, and I'm just thinking, the person is in the middle of the road. The person is in the middle of the road. So you have to, like, when you're driving, you have to go, right, I'm this bit.
And that's precisely why taking your car abroad doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when you have to do the other thing, it's a bit odd. It takes a little bit of practice. So take it easy when you first do it, because we don't want anybody running red lights and getting hit by lorries.
Talking about like doing the big crazy road trip solo. Kev, the legend of Wales, and his friend Dave Howell have just released their video of driving from where they live in North Wales to the Arctic Circle.
Amazing.
In an E39 that they bought probably for sixpence or 2 sheep, whatever they go for in North Wales. And I think they went through 13 or 14 countries, I think it said.
I've got to watch that.
That's why he didn't do the
not
cab
on an
auction,
organised trip.
He didn't do that. In fact, talking of solo trips, didn't Amy talked about driving to Scotland on her own in a Mini?
Yes.
And I heard that and I thought, I'd like to do that because, I annoy myself, but not as much as I annoy other people. Just to be able to
annoy me.
Cruise around there.
I love you, Simon.
Yeah, that trip, I'm going to sit and watch their video. I only sort of skimmed through it. It looks fantastic. I'm going to sit and watch it.
The Kev from Wales one.
Yeah, it looks absolutely amazing. Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah,
I like that as well, because we talked a lot about road trips and the idea of going to car events and stuff like that. But that is a pure road trip. That's picking a destination and driving there in an interesting car, and that's a nice thing to do. So I like the idea of driving to Scandinavia. Now, I would probably marry that up with going to Gapville or going to Finland again for one of those Extreme Wheels events or whatever they are now. Because I went to Finland for what was Extreme Wheels, and the last year they did it, and then they divided it into 2 events. But it was a really good event, and I'd want to go again. And I was looking
at the 2 events called Extreme and Wheels.
Sadly, not. I looked at going over to Denmark and then across to Sweden and driving up through Sweden and into Finland, or taking the ferry. There's like a mad ferry which is full of very drunk Scandinavian people. It's quite legendary from Sweden to Finland. But that, even without the car show at the end, that just sounds like a good trip to me. It just sounds like a good place to go.
You're right.
So maybe the other way to approach it is pick a destination that you want to get to and just make a road trip out of it somehow. And going up to the Arctic Circle.
We stopped by a lake in Klagenfurt where we were camping for Wörthersee in my Audi. I just had it painted and it looked the best it ever looked, and was fully in love with it. Stopped to take photos in a lay-by, and some Norwegian guys pulled up in a Mark 1 Golf. 3 of them got out, which was quite a tight fit because they were like colossal Viking-looking dudes. Got chatting to them. It turns out they'd driven to Wörthersee as well, and this was us all like so proud of ourselves doing this 1,000-kilometre each way trip. They were so far north in Norway where they lived that they had to like worry about polar bears breaking into their car. And they'd driven from there, 3 of them, colossal, in a Mark 1 Golf NA diesel.
A guy did Worthersea
Absolutely
last
brilliant.
year from China in a Passat, didn't
Yeah.
he?
Yeah.
It did.
That is a road trip.
Yeah.
That's not messing about though. So we can manage to get to Scotland if that guy can manage to get from China to Worthing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lovely road trip in Scotland that I've had in my mind. That do they call it the North Coast 500 or something?
Yeah, I want to do that.
That looks phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that's kind of on the cards. I keep on threatening to do stuff like that, and Charlie was talking about going to Switzerland. And I was like, oh, well, I'll drive down there. And she's like, well, I'll fly in and I'll meet you at Basel because then you can go to you can go to Mulhouse beforehand and then come and meet me. But that's quite a nice way of doing it as well because we get a road trip whilst we're there and I get a drive down and stuff. It's quite nice.
A lot of the famous Swiss roads were on our trip that we should be going on in a couple of weeks. The drive to northern Italy
that's the
Stogar.
The wonder of my wife is she went and looked for the best driving roads in Switzerland and then planned the hotels around them.
Yeah, that's precisely what I did as well.
That's why I love that woman, and I love you as well, Andy. So
much disappointment.
It'll still be there. Those roads aren't going anywhere.
So the hotels will all be out of business, but roads are.
And you'll be in quarantine for 2 weeks before you're allowed to start driving.
Okay, so we got to come to an end at some point. So I'm going to end on the question of what are your current dream trips or money no object? What trip would you go on?
Simon can go first.
Oh, thanks. I was hoping you would. I got asked this actually for a Classic Ford article, and there's that curvy bridge road that's somewhere up north, like in Northern Europe or something, which looks really good. I wish I could tell you because you put me on the spot. That one, but otherwise, when we're talking about our potential retro rise trips that we're never going to take, then I'm still voting for Hawaii. I'd like to go to. There's a show that they run every 5 years or something. It's just a massive hot rod thing that people ship their cars out to, and like the whole of the island apparently turns into a massive car show. And they do like a stancy one, Weckfest Hawaii.
Yeah.
And like I say, get some of the place you're going whilst doing the car stuff. Hawaii seems pretty cool. So I'm actually putting a vote forward through the next retro rides trip to be to Hawaii. I drive there though. Obviously, it's awkward in a car.
Quite damp.
Andrew?
It's an impossible question, David.
That's why I asked it.
I mean, I'd quite like the spectacular road trip that I've already planned to actually be happening because I think that would be really good. I've got a few like in my mind that I'd happily arrange for the regular kind of group. We've talked about what's the one in Odessa in the Ukraine, right down in Crimea. What's that called?
Is that those low guys? I can't remember. Not the Larder guys. Only dropped those guys.
Yeah, the show's got a name. I can't remember what it is. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but that looks really good, and that would be a really, really good drive. So that's definitely something that's in my mind. I'd love to do that North Coast 500 though.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, that's the sort of thing where you could literally go, screw it, let's go.
Yeah.
Because it's probably a week, and you could B&B it, or you can wild camp legally in Scotland. I know David wouldn't, but or if I finally managed to find a roof tent that doesn't cost £3,000, I could just go, with Mariangela, and we could just do it and find a B&B every third night to actually have a shower.
Yeah, no, that's
that would be really good.
Thing. Yeah, I like that. For me, there's two, and they're both in the States. I really want to do Red Bull Garage to Portofino Inn. I want to do the proper Cannonball Run Europe. I don't want to do it in a day.
Big in the news this last couple of weeks. You've been following?
Yes, of course. If you look on Retro Rides, there's a thread all about it.
Someone has set a time. Was it 25:50 or something?
There was 26 hours, and then there was someone's
cracked 26 hours. Yeah.
I'd be happy with a 27.
Yeah. So I actually
speeds you have to maintain is just
ridiculous. So I just want to do that trip though, because it's a bit of car folklore, and actually when you look at the route you can take, it's quite nice. You can go across
Yeah.
to Chicago and then go across the plains and then down through Vegas and then over to LA, and
I haven't
through the
even
Grand
mentioned
Canyon
that.
and stuff.
I haven't even mentioned that I did Route 66 in a Mustang.
You see, that's a
This
lovely
is
trip.
That was a bloody good trip. Really good trip.
The
Loads
other one,
to see along that trip.
the other one I picked up was from one of those big companies that does like organized road rallies, and they had a US trip for classic cars. And I really like the idea of buying a classic car and doing it. Go there a week beforehand, finding something, entering it, and doing the drive. Because a lot of the expense of that trip wasn't so much their organized drive; it was shipping your car over to the States to do it. But actually, just the route I took away from it was like actually quite nice. So what it does, it starts up in New York and then sort of goes through New England, then down the country, and then across, and then back up, and ends up in Washington State. And they go through Portland, but it hits Texas as well. It was this awesome route that covered like loads of cool bits of the States. It was a really nicely curated trip. And I just sort of took that little map away, and I've got it saved somewhere because one day,
Just steal it.
Yeah.
Without the organised bit.
Yeah, it sounds like the ideal plan. Well,
something that's a realistic possibility for the next couple of years is Drag Week. It's something we've talked about a lot. We watch it religiously every year, and that would be a really fun thing. If you're not into drag racing, it would be absolutely dreadful. But if you are,
it's perfect.
Good trip. 5 days, racetrack every day, watch drag racing, and then road trip to the next one with, drag cars all around you. They have to be street legal. That's the rules. So
yeah, absolutely.
That'd be a fun thing.
Absolutely bang on. Cool. Thank you very much, gents.
Thank you.
Let's look forward to being allowed out to play, and maybe we can do some more road trips. And if anybody does do any road trips, forum.retro-rides.org, and come and tell us about them, because we do love a good road trip. We'll be back for a future episode. No idea with who, but I'm sure they'll be entertaining, or you're just stuck with me and Simon, one or the other. Bye.
Cheers, gents. Take care.